In 1893, in the heart of the booming, chaotic city of Chicago, two men were building their dreams. One was an architect, a visionary named Daniel Burnham. He was building a magical, temporary city of light, a place of breathtaking beauty and stunning innovation, designed to showcase the promise of America to the entire world. It would be called the White City. The other man was a doctor, a handsome and charming predator named H. Holmes, and he too was building. Just a few miles away from the fairgrounds, he was constructing a castle of darkness, a hotel of horrors, a labyrinth designed for the sole purpose of luring, trapping, and murdering the innocent. Erik Larson's masterpiece, The Devil in the White City, is the gripping, unforgettable, and absolutely true story of these two men and their two creations. It is a journey into the breathtaking light and the terrifying darkness that coexisted at the birth of modern America. And it is a profound philosophical inquiry into the very nature of human progress and the deep, dark shadows that are often cast by our brightest ambitions. To understand the story, you must first understand the sheer, audacious ambition of the 1893 Chicago World's Columbian Exposition. In the late 19th century, America was a rising power, but it was still seen by many in Europe as a crude and uncultured upstart. The city of Chicago itself was the embodiment of this image, a brawling, dirty, and corrupt metropolis that had grown with explosive, unregulated speed. When Chicago was chosen to host the World's Fair, the city's leaders saw it as a chance to change that image. They had one all-consuming goal. They had to outdo the Paris Exposition of 1889 and its revolutionary centerpiece, the Eiffel Tower. They had to prove to the world that America and Chicago had arrived. The man chosen to lead this impossible task was the brilliant and driven architect, Daniel Burnham. Burnham was a man who believed in the power of order, of beauty, and of grand classical design. His motto was, "Make no little plans, they have no magic to stir men's blood." And the plan he and his team of the nation's greatest architects developed was anything but little. Their vision was to build an entire dreamlike city from scratch, on a swampy, unpromising piece of land on the shores of Lake Michigan. It would be a perfectly planned, harmonious landscape of magnificent neoclassical buildings, all painted a dazzling uniform white. It would have grand canals, graceful bridges, and beautiful lagoons, all illuminated at night by the magical new technology of alternating current electricity, a victory for Nikola Tesla in his famous War of the Currents with Thomas Edison. The challenge was staggering. They had less than 3 years to design and build this city. They faced every obstacle imaginable: a brutal economic depression, terrible weather, corrupt politicians, and vicious infighting between the architects themselves. The construction of the White City is a story of incredible human ingenuity and relentless perseverance. It is the story of a team of visionaries who, through sheer force of will, managed to raise a city of breathtaking beauty from the mud. And at its center they built America's answer to the Eiffel Tower, a single, elegant, and utterly terrifying piece of engineering that the world had never seen before. It was a giant rotating wheel, designed by a young engineer named George Washington Gale Ferris Jr. The Ferris wheel. At the very same time that Daniel Burnham and his team were racing against the clock to build their city of light, the other man in our story was patiently constructing his own, much darker, creation. This is the parallel narrative that gives the book its chilling power. While the heroes of Chicago were building a symbol of human progress, a monster was building a factory of death. His name was Dr. H. Holmes. He was born Herman Mudgett, but he was a man of many names and many identities. On the surface, he was the picture of a successful Gilded Age man. He was handsome, he was charismatic, he was well-dressed, and he was a doctor. He was a man people instinctively trusted. But behind this charming facade was a mind of pure, predatory evil. He was a con artist, a bigamist, a swindler, and, as the world would eventually discover, one of the most prolific and sadistic serial killers in American history. In the years leading up to the World's Fair, Holmes moved to the Chicago suburb of Englewood, right on the path that millions of visitors would take to the fairgrounds. And there he began to build his masterpiece. He built a massive 3-story building that would come to be known as the Murder Castle. The ground floor was a series of legitimate-looking shops, including his own pharmacy, but the upper floors were a labyrinth, a maze of his own design, built for a single, horrifying purpose. The building was a funhouse of architectural horrors. It contained dozens of small, windowless rooms, stairways that led to nowhere. and secret soundproofed passages that allowed Holmes to move through the building like a ghost. Many of the rooms were fitted with gas pipes so that he could asphyxiate his victims from a control panel in his office. There were trapdoors in the floors and chutes that led down to a secret dungeon-like basement. And in that basement, he had installed a surgical table for dissecting his victims, and a massive, custom-built kiln hot enough to incinerate human remains. The construction of the castle was a masterpiece of manipulation in itself. Holmes would constantly hire and fire different construction crews so that no one but him ever understood the building's true monstrous design. He was building a private, self-contained universe of absolute power and control, a place where he could indulge his darkest fantasies without any fear of being discovered. The collision of two worlds. On May 1, 1893, the world's Columbian Exposition, the White City, officially opened. It was a triumph. Millions of visitors from all over America and the world flocked to Chicago to witness its wonders. They were stunned by the scale and the beauty of the architecture. They were dazzled by the electric lights that turned the fairgrounds into a magical wonderland at night. And they were thrilled by a ride on the gigantic Ferris wheel, which lifted them 264 feet into the air, giving them a god's-eye view of the magnificent city below. The fair was a sensation. It introduced America to a host of new things that would become staples of modern life, from Cracker Jack and juicy fruit gum to the Pledge of Allegiance. It was a vision of a clean, orderly, and technologically advanced future. But the fair also created a perfect storm of opportunity for the man in the murder castle. The event brought a massive influx of people into the already chaotic city of Chicago, and among them were thousands of young, single women who had come to the city looking for work, for adventure, and for a new life. They were often alone, they were new to the city, and they were, in a word, vulnerable. The fair, with its massive anonymous crowds, provided the perfect hunting ground for H.H. Holmes. While millions of people were gazing in wonder at the architectural marvels of the White City, Holmes was using his charm and his respectable facade as a doctor to lure his victims into the dark, hidden world of his Black City just a few miles away. He would hire young women to work in his shops, he would seduce and propose to wealthy widows, he would promise them the world, and then they would simply disappear. They would check into his hotel and never check out. The same boom and excitement that made the White City possible also provided the perfect cover for the devil to do his work. The hunt for the devil. For the entire duration of the fair, H.H. Holmes operated with almost complete impunity. The Chicago police force was overwhelmed with managing the crowds and the petty crime associated with the event, and in a time before modern forensics and in a city with a high transient population, people, especially young single women, could disappear without raising much alarm. The unraveling of H.H. Holmes's empire did not begin with the discovery of the murders. It began, as it so often does with con artists, with his financial crimes. After the fair ended, Holmes abandoned his castle and embarked on a complex insurance fraud scheme with a longtime accomplice named Benjamin Petetzel. The plan was for Petetzel to fake his own death so they could collect on a life insurance policy. But Holmes, true to his nature, decided it was easier to just kill Petetzel for real. And then he did something even more monstrous. He took 3 of Petetzel's young children, Alice, Nellie, and Howard, on a horrifying cross-country journey, all while lying to their desperate mother that her husband was still alive and in hiding. This final cruel act would be his undoing. The hunt for H.H. Holmes is led by a dogged and brilliant detective from Philadelphia named Frank Geyer. Geyer was assigned to the seemingly mundane task of finding the 3 missing Petetzel children. But his investigation slowly and methodically began to uncover the trail of deception, fraud, and ultimately, murder that Holmes had left in his wake. Geyer's journey, which takes him across the country from Indianapolis to Toronto, is a masterpiece of old-fashioned detective work. He follows the cold trail, he interviews dozens of witnesses, and he slowly pieces together the horrifying truth of what happened to the children. At the same time, the investigation into Holmes's financial crimes leads the police back to his abandoned hotel in Chicago, and it is there that they finally uncover the full, sickening extent of his depravity. They find the secret rooms, the gas pipes, the chutes, the surgical tools, and the bone fragments in the basement kiln. They had finally found the devil's workshop. H. Holmes was finally captured in Boston in 1894. He was tried, convicted, and hanged for the murder of Benjamin Petetzel, though he is thought to have killed dozens and possibly hundreds more. The ultimate message of The Devil in the White City is not just a thrilling true crime story, it is a profound philosophical meditation on the duality that lies at the heart of human nature and at the heart of the American experiment. The 1893 Chicago World's Fair was a moment of incredible optimism, a demonstration of humanity's capacity for breathtaking creation, for collaboration, for order, and for beauty. It was a vision of a utopian future, a white city that would inspire a generation of architects, city planners, and even Walt Disney himself, who was said to have been deeply influenced by its design. It was a symbol of the immense light of which we are capable. But at the exact same moment in the exact same city, the story of H. Holmes reveals the opposite. It is a story of our capacity for absolute depravity, for deception, for destruction, and for a kind of evil that is almost impossible to comprehend. He represents the deep and terrifying darkness that can also be unleashed by the anonymity and the ambition of the modern world. The book is a masterful and unsettling reminder that light and shadow are forever intertwined. Great leaps of progress and innovation can also create new and terrible opportunities for darkness to flourish. The story of the architect and the devil is not just a story about 1893 Chicago, it is a timeless, philosophical fable about the two opposing forces that are always at war, not just in our society, but within our own human hearts. It is an inquiry into the very nature of good and evil. If you believe that we must study both the light and the dark to truly understand our world, then you are in the right place. Welcome to Geeky Philosopher. Subscribe, and let's continue to explore the complex and often hidden stories that define our history.